series sponsored by the Nancy Parker Endowment Fund. Tonight, Sally Jacobs is here to help you manage your collections of photographs. As a professional archivist, she knows secrets that will bring order to the chaos and extend the life of your photos, both film and digital. Sally has a master's in library science with a specialization in archives management from UW-Madison. She has worked on collections at the Library of Congress, Wisconsin Historical Society, American Girl, American Red Cross, and many family collections. Her business, Jacobs Archival Services of Madison, focuses on preserving photographs, heirloom textiles, letters, stamp and coin collections, and other items. Please welcome Sally Jacobs.
Hi everyone, I'm very glad to be here in Janesville. It's my first chance to see this unbelievably beautiful library. We're very lucky. I want to say congratulations to all of you for showing up here. A lot of people are the keepers of their family photo album, but not a lot of people take it as, take on the responsibility of making sure those photos last as long as possible, so right on. You've already heard about my background. I didn't imagine that I would grow up to be an archivist. I'm sure you all can understand why. I didn't know there was such a thing. But once I figured out what it was absolutely my calling, and I've always loved photographs, even before I became a history geek. So you can see how those two worlds come together. Actually, my friend Kathy, who's helping out back there, and I used to work together at American Girl, where I was the image researcher, where I actually got paid money to find historical photos. There's not many jobs like that. There's just a couple things I want to clarify before we start. So a couple of clarifications and then a quiz. Don't be scared. The first thing I want to clarify is the pronunciation of archivist. Archivists work in an archive, but we're called archivists. I'm not responsible for this pronunciation, but I just want to let you know. And if anyone ever introduces themselves to you as an archivist, you might want to ask where they got their degree. Another thing I want to clarify is that the difference between preservation and conservation. We're going to talk a lot about preservation tonight. What most people think about when they think about preservation is conservation, which is actually working on damaged items. Conservators have usually a science background when we're talking about paper, often it's chemistry, and they do very long apprenticeships. Basically, they're the ones in the white lab coats, like almost like an archaeologist, right, with really intricate tools doing extremely detailed work. I'm not a conservator. I don't fix broken items. But I am a preservationist, right? And what that means, the role of the preservationist is to make sure that the conservators basically are put out of business, right? You work on the front end strategically to sort of control the environment and slow down whatever processes are happening to prevent further damage so they can last as long as possible. Just so you know. Okay, you ready for the quiz? All right, this is an actual quote from my very first archives professor, and I don't think Kathy's ever heard me hear this talk, so she'll know the answer. One of these three things is something that he's famous for saying, all right? The first is, the hardest thing to figure out is where the heck to put it all, that's A. B, when in doubt, throw it out. And C, what comes here stays here. So who thinks it's A? Nobody thinks it's A. How about B? How about C? Because you guys already have the handout already. That's great. It usually stumps them every time. It's true. And in fact, in the car on the way down, Kathy and I were talking about how, what sets apart an archivist from a collector is a willingness to acknowledge that everything can't be kept forever and ever. And it means you have to think a little bit smarter about what you're going to keep. But in some ways, it also can be very freeing to know that you don't, that in the case of photographs, not all photographs are created equal. They don't all have the same value. So talking about when archivists decide what to keep or not to keep, they call it appraisal. But this is not Antiques Roadshow appraisal. This does not have to do with monetary value, right? Resale value. This has to do with its value for the collection, and should we invest the time and the money to make sure that they last as long as possible. And what I found works really well when I try and explain this to folks who are working on their own family photos is a wine cellar, a fine wine analogy, right? So you can have a wine connoisseur who has limitless funds, right? Has a state-of-the-art wine cellar in the basement. It's climate controlled, it's humidity controlled, it's exactly what it needs to be. And that's where the wine connoisseur would keep their $15,000 a case bottle of Rothschild. I don't have the year with me because I don't have my notes, but you get my point, right? However, that very same person could easily store an inexpensive bottle of red wine that's their table wine for dinner upright right next to the hot stove, which is the worst possible way to store it if you want it to last for a long time and use drinking it, many, many years from now. So that can also hold true for your family photos. And if anybody just want to take a guess, like if you're thinking about your own family photos, what's something that would be a wine cellar photo, right? One for the ages that you want, your children's children's children to be able to enjoy if possible. Wedding portrait, absolutely. Wedding portrait's very important. Can anyone think of something that is the opposite, that's maybe a kitchen photo?
Family vacations.
That's exactly right. The example I'd like to use, unfortunately, at the expense of my husband, is we were traveling and there were these beautiful rock formations, and he was so excited that he was taking photo after photo. And even while he was taking them, I was like, honey, when we get home and you're looking at a little print, they're all going to look the same. But he's like, but I'm so excited. And that's why we do it, because you want to bring your vacation home with you. You want to literally capture it and keep it forever. A few years later, every flower that you saw on your vacation does not have the same value. And I can tell you from my own experience from inheriting my grandparents' photos that what future generations are going to want is not the photos of the Eiffel Tower, which you can get anywhere, but the photos of you on vacation, enjoying yourself and having a good time. That's what's going to be valuable throughout the years. And here on your handouts, I've got other things that will help you sort of determine things that have high value. Archivists respect age, right? The older something is, tends to be also more scarce. Scarcity is also important. If obviously we're talking about the only known photo of someone, that's going to have very high value. And I already mentioned the future generations are going to be interested in pictures of you and pictures of themselves, of course. Everyone's always interested in pictures of themselves. And what historians are interested in, if you're thinking about it in that way, is pictures of everyday life. That's an important part of the historical record. It's not just presidents and kings, right? It's how we live our lives every day. Things that have lower value are can also be blurry photographs. And again, if you have a blurry photograph and it's the only known photograph of someone, obviously the scarcity is going to overrule the blurriness. But if you're going through your photos and you're organizing, don't hesitate to get rid of the ones that really don't look that great, that you don't need to see forever and ever. Duplicates, you certainly don't need to throw them out, but pass them along, especially if, to the person who's pictured in there, because people love that. They really do. And then, of course, the repetitive photographs, 8,000 rock formations. And yes, it is okay to throw out photographs. I know, it sounds sacrilegious. And in fact, when I was in library school, the photo archivist at the time had each of us rip up a photograph. It had already been decided that these were not going to be kept, and it was, not because that was better than putting it in the recycling bin, but because it broke a psychological barrier, right? Photographs have value. I love photographs. That's why I became a photo archivist. But they don't all have equal value. But again, you don't have to be dramatic and throw it out. When I do workshops, longer workshops, I do actually make my students rip a photograph. And every time, there's one person who just can't do it. But usually if I give them a different one, if I let them choose a different one, they're okay. So absolutely share the photos that you don't want to keep anymore. If you are crafty at all, by golly, you can really make some nifty cards with them. Even ones that are just, that are the flowers. Even the ones that are just aesthetically pleasing, but don't have as much value to you because the vacation was so long ago. The first step, if you're going to get organized and you're going to organize your photos, what archivists do first off is a rough inventory, right? One of the secrets that archivists know is that you don't have to describe, if you want to get in writing a written description of what your collection has, you don't have to list every single photograph. You can describe things in bulk. That's how we describe it, right? You can describe, for the first go-through of an inventory, I would say find all the rooms in your house that have photographs and just write down generally what that means. And there's, examples on this. There are 5 albums that were mine, and they're from generally 1978 to 1990. And then what I also like to do is put in parentheses any preservation concerns you might have about those particular photos or the storage area. If you've got some stuff in the basement and you know it's been wet before, you gotta write it down. If you see things that are faded or color shifted, I would also make note of that. Which is one of the great values of an inventory, is it gives you an idea of what kind of shape things are in. Another good question to ask as you're going through your photos is, what's missing, right? And they're usually, it's not until you get them all together, right? You collate it, bring them all together either on paper or you physically put them all in one room, that you get an idea of what's missing. And there may be other branches of your family who may have those photos, and you can reach out to them and ask them for them. And of course, ask yourself, what no longer has value to me? Put them in the pile. Does anyone have any questions about that part? Okay. So secret number one, you can't keep everything. You don't have to keep everything. If you have the space and you have the money, then by all means keep it all. But maybe set some aside that are your favorites, make it easier for the kids. So now we're going to talk about how to store your photographs, because secret number two is, if you've decided that this is something you want to keep and you want to last a good long time, then you're going to have to treat it right. There are ways to extend its life that aren't terribly complicated and don't involve HVAC systems. Just going to run through sort of quick the dangers, the things that are threats to your photographs. High humidity encourages mold and pests. And very low humidity can also cause damage to photographs through cracking. Here in Wisconsin, we don't have much of a problem with that, but I always put that in there just in case anyone's retiring to Arizona, so you know. Let me talk for just a moment about the structure of a photo print. Now, I'm not talking about film, I'm not talking about negatives or slides, but an actual paper print. You've got the backing material, which is paper, and then you've got a binding layer, a binder layer, and then you've got the emulsion. The image itself lives in the emulsion layer, but they're all made out of different materials. So when you've got humidity, and especially when you've got cycling humidity, high humidity and then low humidity, that paper, which is hygroscopic, that's a fancy word for it absorbs water, right? It will suck in, those fibers will actually swell up, suck in water, ambient moisture, and when the humidity goes down again, it releases it. So that's actually causing structural stress on that photograph. The other layers may not be experiencing that in the same way. They're not paper, they don't have paper fibers in them. So that can cause cracking. High temperatures. High temperatures are a bad idea, and here is why. Photographs are made through a chemical process, right? You use chemicals to create them. Those chemicals are changing over time, and there really isn't anything we can do about that except slow it down. And every increase in 10 degrees doubles the rate of deterioration that's already going on in photos. I'm going to say that one again because that one's really important. Every increase in 10 degrees doubles the rate of deterioration. So if you leave your photos in an attic that gets real hot in summer, you are dramatically shortening the life of those photographs. So we'll get into better places to store your photos in just a moment. Another factor that is damaging to photographs is ultraviolet light. Does anyone want to take a guess what it does? It fades things, just like it fades our couches and our fabrics. So if you've got photos on the wall or on a shelf somewhere, make sure they're not in direct sunlight. The safest thing to do is just to make a copy. One of the great things about photographs and paper records is that they're easy to duplicate. Put the duplicate on display. That's what museums do, that's what archives do. They very rarely put an original on display. If you can't, if that doesn't appeal to you, there are plexiglass, a glass alternative for a frame that block out, I think, up to 90% of UV light. Just so you know, I think any good framing place should be able to get you that. And also Light Impressions Direct.com, which is listed on your resources, sells that as well in standard sizes. Pardon me, folks, I'm just getting over strep, and I'm not sure how long my voice is going to last, but we'll keep going. Other things that are damaging are dust and dirt and airborne pollutants. I'm not going to get into the airborne pollutants much because I like to believe that we don't, we're not in Buenos Aires. You know what I mean? There's not that there isn't pollutants in the air. I haven't personally seen dramatic deterioration based on those, but just know that it's another factor. Dust eventually turns to dirt. My first job out of college was working at a bookstore called Half Price Books down in Madison. There's several. And it's one of those stores where people bring in their stuff to sell. And that was one of my jobs, to buy items. And I can tell you for a fact that dust does turn into dirt. I mean, almost potting soil eventually. It's pretty wild. And once it gets, any sort of pebble or hard consistency, even as you brush it off, you can cause scratches. And especially on the emulsion of photographs is very, on photo prints and film, susceptible to scratching and damage. So you just want to keep them away from dust. Fingerprints are also damaging. This is why archivists wear white gloves, right? There are salts and oils on your hands that can be transferred to prints. You might not see it now, it'll be invisible now, but trust me, it'll show up eventually, and I've seen enough 19th century photographs with, very clearly thumbprint right in the middle to know that this is something that's going to happen over time. Some people really don't like wearing gloves. They find them difficult to work with. They find, they just don't have enough control. If that's the case and you really can't do it, then this is what you need to do instead. You need to wash your hands before you start working on your photographs. Don't put any lotion on them. And if you get up, if you're sitting and sorting through photographs, if you get up, answer the phone, answer the door, have a snack, wash your hands again before you sit down. And that should be pretty, that will help a lot. And that will, just gets rid of the oils that are on the surface of your fingers. And actually, if you're working for a really long time, if you actually are making real progress and you lose a couple hours as you're working, after a couple hours you should probably wash your hands again. But by that time you should get up and have a snack, move around. So it all works together. Other threats to photographs are vermin and pests, right? This is another reason to stay away from places like attics and basements and garages. Mice and rats can nibble on paper. They can also leave behind nasty surprises. I'm not going to detail it any more than that, but you know what I'm saying. So, one way to think about how you're going to improve the environment, right, in which you're storing your photographs is to sort of mentally divide it into two things. There's the macro environment, which is it's the relative humidity and temperature of that room. It's the amount of sunlight that that room receives. It can be expensive to change those things. Humidity levels in particular can be very difficult to control. However, it's easier to control the microenvironment, and that's what we're going to get to next. But as far as places in your house which are a good bet to store your photographs, an interior closet is a great idea. I have a closet in my house that's on a southern-facing wall, and in the summer that closet gets very hot. And we have central air conditioning. We have an air-conditioned house, and it's astonishing to me how hot that is. And in fact, someday I keep telling myself I have to remember to put a thermometer in there and take a picture of it, because it's pretty dramatic. Another good place to store photographs is underneath the bed, if you have room, assuming that it's in a box and you're not letting the dust in. Not a good idea if there's a heating vent under there. But other than that, or a radiator. And people usually want to sleep near the heat source, so keep an eye on that, because you don't want it to heat up that way. And so that's a macro environment. Does anyone have any questions about that? Generally speaking, when we're talking about family photo collections that are staying in the home, I'm not going to give you the ideal temperature and humidity. Just know that generally speaking, what's comfortable for people is comfortable for photos. Photos and film like it a little bit colder, but if you want to keep your house 5 to 10 degrees colder for your photos, that's great. Hey, but it's not necessary, right? The other thing is climate controlled, and and I don't mean to the absolute perfect temperature. What I mean is heated in the winter, cooled in the summer. And the trick is you don't want the temperature to change too dramatically. So if you are storing photographs in a place that's not climate controlled like that, you want to make sure in the spring, first nice warm spring day, you don't want to just open everything up and let that temperature rise really quickly. Better for it to be in a climate controlled building in the first place. So now let's talk about the microclimate. And that is just simply the folders, envelopes, sleeves, and boxes, and albums that you store your photographs in. And obviously, your best choice is to buy archival quality. And it's a little bit harder than you think, and I apologize because I'm starting to lose my voice. Because there's one very tricky thing, and that is that the term archival, when it comes to being labeled on products, is meaningless. It is an unregulated term, just like photo-safe. There's another one that we use all the time. Generally, if something says acid-free, it probably is acid-free, and that's good. That's better than something that's acidic, but that doesn't alone make it archival, and that's particularly true of plastics. So what do? If the term archival doesn't mean anything, what do you do? Fortunately, there is an independent test called the PAT, the Photographic Activity Test. And basically what it is an age acceleration test. So what they do is they take, say it's an envelope that's used to store photographs. They take the envelope, put a photograph in it, put it in a special chamber that uses pressure and heat to try to simulate what's going to happen over time to those photos. And they bake it for a while, and they keep it in there for a good long time. When they take it out, if there are any changes, if there has been any reaction between the two things, like let's say that it wasn't a paper envelope, that it was a plastic sleeve, if it sticks to it, fails the test. So this is really something that's passed the photographic activity test is your best assurance that this is an inert material. It's not going to change over time, and it's not going to interact with your photographs in a way that's harmful. You can find materials like that at archival suppliers, and I'm pretty sure they're listed on your handout. Anyway, I'll write them down if they're not on there. Lightimpressionsdirect.com, and they specialize in photographs. So they have great framing supplies and photo storage things, every conceivable kind of album that you could want.
What was that name?
It's Light Impressions is the name of the company, but they're...
Page 2.
It's on page 2? Excellent. I knew it was in there somewhere. There's also, well, for boxes, there's a company called Hollinger Corporation. Yeah, yeah. Their online catalog is not the easiest to use, but you can, you know, if you can find their 800 number, they'll be more than happy to send you a catalog. They're a more general archival supply company. In fact, they mostly work with institutions, historical societies, and libraries. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about storage? Yeah.
How would you know when you picked up something that said it was archival, that it had passed this test?
They'll put it on there. I mean, you know, companies pay money to have this test on. It's an independent testing service, so it's their own dime paying for it. So if they paid for it, they're going to put it on there. I have not seen items in stores that are labeled that way, but if they come from, you know, if you can find a retail store that's selling materials that they got from Light Impressions, you can be pretty sure that it has passed PAT. Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, I don't know if you guys know about sticky magnetic albums. You guys, word's actually gotten out pretty well about them. They're awful. They're absolutely terrible. They're a chemical sandwich. You've got all of my photographs from high school were put in those because I'm craft impaired, and so being able to slap it down, pick it up, and move it was very important to me. But the problem is that the backing board is acidic, right? The strips of glue are also acidic, and then you've got a vinyl overlay. And I'll get to vinyl in just a minute, which is basically trapping. So it's trapping your photographs, I know, in that environment, which is a terrible thing. There is a tool to remove them. It's not a cutting tool. It's called a micro spatula. And actually, I have kits with me tonight for sale that include micro spatula and gloves and some acid-free paper that's past the PAT, in case you get those photos out and they still have a little glue on the back. You can cut it to size and stick it on the back there. That same tool, though, is not necessarily, it's not the right tool if you have photographs that have been glued into a scrapbook, like those beautiful scrapbooks with the black pages. It's not, you know, I mean, that's glued, it's not going to help you, but because the magnetic albums were designed to be rearranged and removed and replaced, and sometimes even the glue has dried out and they come out pretty easily. The one thing you don't want to do, though, is just grab a corner and pull. That's just a bad idea because you can actually crack the emulsion as you bend it over, especially if it's giving you a lot of resistance. Vinyl. If you find enclosures for photographs, they're plastic and it says acid-free, like I said, that's great. Acid-free is great, but you don't want them to have any PVC in it. You don't want them to have any vinyl. And basically, there's a real simple way. If you give it a sniff test, it smells funny. If it smells anything like a shower curtain, it's vinyl. Don't put your photographs in it. But that sniff test is also helpful if you're buying boxes and other things, because basically what's happening, if you're smelling a really strong chemically smell, it's, you know, those materials, whether it's the glue or the paper or the board that made the box itself, are off-gassing, meaning they're giving off molecules. You don't know if those are going to interact negatively with your photographs, but part of the strategy of preservation is reduce any risk that you can. So that's just a little side about boxes. The golden rule of preservation is don't do anything that you can't undo, right? So something like lamination, terrible idea. It actually heat seals plastic onto a piece of paper that can never be separated. I mean, it just can't be undone. There's an archival alternative called encapsulation, which is basically 2 inert sheets of plastic, and then you've got double-sided tape around the perimeter. The tape doesn't touch your document. Your document actually floats in the middle because of the static charge of the 2 pieces of plastic. There are companies, Metal Edge Inc. sells a kit where, so if if you've got a 5x7 something that you want to encapsulate, if you've got an 8x10 something, they'll send you the 2 sheets and the double-sided tape with one side of the peel still on the tape. So it's all cut and ready to go. Put your document in the middle and then you just peel up the tape and stick it down. It's easy. That's great for things that get a lot of handling, right? I generally prefer paper to store my photographs. We're talking about storage, not display, right? For storing my photographs, I prefer paper because it can breathe. Plastic tends to trap things. What plastic is good for is it keeps people's hands off of it, right? So if you're a historical society and your job is to serve historic, one-of-a-kind photos up to the public, and you don't have a duplicate set, you don't have surrogates that you can deliver, then it makes perfect sense to put everything in a sleeve, and then when you serve someone, their fingers are never going to touch it. You don't have to watch over their shoulder, make sure they're wearing gloves. Tape and glue are a bad idea because they can't be. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Excuse me. What happens to, let's say, a photograph or a news article that you've laminated?
What happens to something that's been laminated? There's a good chance that the plastic that was used to laminate it is acidic, and it's going to start eating away at it. There's not a lot of alternatives. It really can't be undone, but fortunately you can make a copy of it. You can take a photograph of it. You can try to get it on a scanner. Hopefully there won't be too much glare. Yeah, it's tough. And conservators spend an outrageous amount of time removing tape at a rate that would make you scream. It takes so long. I don't know how they do it and keep their sanity. So yeah, tape, bad idea, and glue is a bad idea. Tape and glue, right? Tape is basically just a strip of plastic sprayed with an adhesive. It's still basically glue. Glue is made up primarily of water. And eventually, that water is going to evaporate. So eventually, glue will dry out. Hopefully before the acids in the glue destroy your photograph. But it's just tough. I mean, it's just inevitable, right? This is two truths in archiving. A skylight will always leak eventually, and glue will always dry out eventually. So if you're trying to label your photographs and you don't want that information to ever become separated, then writing on a page in a scrapbook is a very safe way to label something unless eventually it crumbles and it falls apart and then the information and the photograph that it's describing have been separated. As far as labeling photographs, the safest way is with a #1 pencil. That's an extra soft pencil. You can usually find them at art supply stores. In Madison, the University Bookstore happens to sell them. And the reason why you want an extra soft one is because you don't want to have to push too hard, right? You're writing on the back of a photograph. You don't want to push too hard because you can actually emboss it to the front if you're pushing too hard. There's no question that pencil is the easiest way, and if you've got a paper print that's older, it's not a problem. If you have a more recent print that's very plasticky, or if you have film or slides, that doesn't work so well, although slides come in handy. Older slides with cardboard, you can use pencil to mark it. There's not any perfect option for those sorts of photos. You can mark the enclosure that it's in, if it's an envelope or if it's in a sleeve. But again, just as with glue, it's possible that that information can get separated from what you're describing. I have seen suggestions that you take sandpaper. This is so crazy. Sandpaper and sort of lightly try and get the top plasticky layer off of the photograph and then write with a pencil. Ludicrous. What I recommend, and it's not perfect, but that's sort of a workaround, is to use an archival marking pen, which is basically a permanent marker. And what does the archival mean? Does that mean it'll last forever? Does it mean it won't damage your photos? No. In the case of archival pens, what it means is that it's a non-fading ink, that they've tested that ink for light fastness over time to make sure it doesn't fade. But again, when we were talking about the layers of a photograph, right? There's just 3 layers, and if you put ink on one layer, eventually it's going to work its way through. Not in 5 years, not in 10 years, maybe not even in 50 years. But eventually, right? I mean, archivists think in long term here. Eventually it's going to come through. But my simple workaround solution is you look at the front of the photo that you want to label, and you just pick the corner where there isn't anything, where there's, who cares, right? It's sky, it's lake, it's not anybody's face. So that's my main recommendation is if you need to use a permanent marker to label your photos, don't write across, right in the middle. Because eventually it's going to come through. Another good idea for if you want your photographs to last as long as possible is very simple, and that's extra copies and spreading around copies, right? The more there are of anything, the more likely it is that any one of them will survive. If you have a duplicate set of photos of someone else's house, your house, heaven forbid, right, gets struck by lightning, burns to the ground. Still have some photos. Okay. Does anybody have any follow-up on that part? Because we're going to go into digital next. Yes?
I have a question about you talk about putting things in sleeves, but these sleeves, aren't they plastic too?
Sleeves, yes. All plastics are not created equal. That's a good point. There are plastics that are inert, that don't change over time, and anything that's past the PAT is going to be safe for your photos, whether it's plastic or paper.
So is that labeled on packages?
It's there's a company called Print File, and they sell a lot of sleeves that go in 3-ring binders, and all of their materials have passed the PAT, but they don't. I don't think they put it on their packaging. They might. I haven't looked at a pack, you know, like a retail packet they put on the wall.
Is that do they have a website?
There is a website called pfile.com, but here's the trick about them, because Print File, I don't know if they sell directly, but Print File usually is available in photo stores. Will happen if you go to the section where there's the ones for 35mm negatives are probably the most common one that people have seen, because people tend to put those in a binder more than prints. So check a photo store. Pfile.com sells print file stuff, but stay away from the Pioneer stuff. I've actually contacted that company on several occasions, asking them if their materials have passed the PAT, which is a sort of obnoxious thing I do on a regular basis. No, I mean, I want to know if I want to, if I'm going to resell any items, I have to know. I won't sell anything that hasn't passed the PAT, because what's the point? Why don't you come to an archival company if it's not for that? And they never return my calls. They've never responded to me, so I have to assume that the answer is no.
They don't respond to anything, so
Yeah.
it's not just you.
Oh, yeah. Even on the phone, so yeah. Anything else on storage materials? Yes.
Have you used a pH pen to test the acidity of various material?
The question is, should you use a pH pen to test the acidity? And it works on paper. It won't do anything for plastic. And it's acid-free is absolutely better than acidic. There's no question. Not just for what happens when it's in contact with your photos, but also because acidic paper is going to crumble sooner than anything else. And if it's this, if it's holding your photograph, that's not going to be much help. If you're talking about, the back of the photograph itself, there's really not much you can do if you find that it's acidic. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Sure. Yes.
The photos I have, is it better to put them in, I know, sleeves or Ziploc bags, or is it better to put them in paper envelopes or folders?
The question is, if you're storing your photos at home, should you put them in paper or plastic? Which is the question you get at the grocery store, isn't it? I prefer paper for a number of reasons, right? Because it breathes, right? And it's also very easy to label. I've had a couple of pretty big photo organizing projects that I've started and not finished. There's no magic to it, you just gotta keep working at it. But even as I'm sorting, to have a paper envelope that I could keep notes on, like a lot of these were, my grandmother, my father's mother, had put the vintage family photos in sticky magnetic albums. And so it fell to me to get them out of there. I insisted on it actually, because it was just killing me that they were in there. But as I was doing that, my dad and I sat down together at his kitchen table, and as he talked about the photos, not while the photos are in the envelope, just so you know, right? You don't want to write on an envelope with photos underneath because you'll emboss it. But on the empty envelope where I was going to put that, and in some cases it was kind of a stack of photos. It wasn't necessarily one photo in an envelope, but just writing down family stories associated with those events and things like that. It was just so easy. If you prefer plastic, I wouldn't use any old Ziploc bag. I definitely would not recommend that.
No, I just wondered, I could choose between a paper envelope and a plastic bag,
Right.
so to speak. When I'm sorting pictures
Sure.
and then storing them till I get to do something.
Exactly.
So paper would be better.
What I would recommend most highly is paper that's passed the photographic activity test. And then even if it takes you a long time to finish that project, they're still better off than the way they were before. You know what I mean? You've stabilized them. And that's sort of my approach to organizing, right? I don't handle the final presentation. I'm craft impaired, I'm not a graphic designer, right? But what I teach people how to do is to get their photos organized enough so they know what they have, they know where it is, they've decided, they've made some priorities about what needs to be done first, thought about what they want to keep and what they don't want to keep. And then from there, you can put them into albums, you can plan a family photo scanning project, right? Instead of just starting, because it's so exciting to be able to share photos. I've done it myself, right? Just grabbing old family photos, scanning and sending them off, and I haven't thought about the file name and, you know what I'm saying. So I would definitely recommend paper for those reasons. If you can find, a Ziploc baggie that's past the PAT, then that's okay too. whatever works for you. And obviously plastic gives some advantage of, being a moisture barrier if you spill something on it, or if there's flooding, but of course, we're not keeping our photos in the basement that gets flooded, right? So that's fine. All right, we've got 20 minutes to cover digital, which is not a lot of time, but we can at least get started, and there are some things y'all really need to know, and the word is not out there about digital and the realities of preserving digital. It's not a lost cause, but it takes a different set of strategies to make sure that our digital information is going to be available in 10, 20, 30 years. Okay, I want to clarify first of all that I'm not anti-digital. I love old photographs, but I love digitizing. I think it's a phenomenal tool. It's not going to replace the original prints, but it allows you to easily make a surrogate, a duplicate of something, so the original doesn't have to go on display. It allows you to restore photos digitally. I mean, Photoshop whizzes can do astonishing things with a very damaged photograph that can be scanned. They can pretty much bring it back to what it used to look like. It's really, in fact, I have an example. I'll just pass it around. I don't know how well you can see this from far away, so I'm going to pass it around, but here's a before. Can you see the cracking? You ready? I mean, it's just amazing. And that's not something that you could do just with the print itself. 20, 30 years ago, that wouldn't have been possible. You could have taken a photograph of it, had a new negative, and painted it, maybe, but that was pretty much it. Digital copies also take up less storage space. That's a nice advantage, especially if you're talking about a second set. It's easier to convince someone in your family to store an extra set if it doesn't take up half of the room. And you can access them remotely, right? This is a big deal for historical societies who want to be able to have folks enjoy, use, and even publish their photographs without necessarily having to come visit the historical society itself. But there is a dark side. There is someone who likes to say that today's history, right, the history of today, is born digital and it dies young. It's very tricky. The media that we use to store information, right, there's magnetic media, data tapes, VHS also happens to be magnetic, so you know, and floppy disks. Who still has floppy disks? I hope so. I don't have anything to play them on, but I'm compelled to keep them. Magnetic media can fail in as little as 5 to 10 years, right? It's very fragile. If you get it near a magnet, it's not very stable over time. And anyone who's played a VHS tape from a while ago might be shocked to see what sort of shape it's in. We were just watching, my family and I were watching an old videotape. It was actually taped from TV, so it was something that sort of got heavy use. I'm sure we watched it a few times. But the sound had already gone. The sound was gone. And if that had been a home movie, that would have been very sad. So keep an eye on your digital stuff. Keep an eye on your magnetic media, even if it's not digital. Take a look at, especially your home movies if they're on videotape. Optically etched media, that's CDs and DVDs, right? There's a dye layer that's actually burned, and that's why it's called etched. And then it's dried with a bead. Those can begin to degrade within 5 to 15 years. They're vulnerable to damage from scratches, and everyone here probably protects the silver shine the bottom side, right, of a CD or a DVD from scratches, right? Does anybody here protect the top from scratches? The top is actually more vulnerable than the bottom, and it has to do with the way it's designed. That dye layer that holds the information is closer to the top surface than it is to the bottom surface. And I don't have an explanation why. My theory is that everyone assumed that people would just be leaving them on desks and sort of scratching them around that way, so they added an extra layer to prevent that. So that's one reason why you should never use a ballpoint pen to write on a CD or a DVD, because you may just scratch right through that data layer and completely disappear.
Is a magic marker all right? Permanent?
The safest way to label a CD or a DVD is to use a permanent ink marker, but on the hub, right, which is the center clear part, the part that doesn't have any data, the part that doesn't show any silver. It's a tiny little area, and it's hard to write in there, but if you want to be... And what you can do is, since usually we store CDs and DVDs in a case, right, and you can put the long explanation of what's in there on there, and maybe a number. This is CD number 10, and then all you got to write on that little inside hub is a 10.
At the photo store one day, they had an article on counter about gold being lasting longer than the silver is?
Yes, there are two different types of dye layers to choose from when you're purchasing CDs, and that's also true of DVD. It is true that the gold ones last longer. The dye layer is a different dye, basically, is what it means. Gold CDs are generally accepted as better. That doesn't mean they're going to last forever. And for my photos myself, when I'm making 2 backups on disk, I burn one in gold and I burn one in regular, which, as far as I'm concerned, is sort of hedging your bets about which one's going to go first. But it's unquestionably true that if you invest in CDs from reputable companies, that they will last longer. And there is independent testing that shows that. I don't know who these guys are, they're crazy hobbyists, but I'm really glad they did it. They bought CDs from different manufacturers that were sort of high-end and low-end, and there was no question about it. That was the main factor that determined which ones were going to last the longest. And if anyone's interested, I can actually, not off the top of my head, but if you email me, I can give you the link for that research, which is actually very interesting. It might be on my webpage, actually, if you look under articles. Or Preservation Spotlight. I think it's still there. Here's the other scary thing about digital. When digital fails, it fails catastrophically, right? There's generally not a lot of middle ground, right? It's not the same thing as a Polaroid photograph that has shifted to, and it looks very green, right? You can still see that image is not lost. If you only have one CD of digitals, a photo, and of your photos, and that CD is damaged, I mean, you can't look at the CD and see it, right? I mean, it's gone. So it's pretty terrifying. But it's not impossible, right? I mean, there are ways to save this. And just as with your paper prints, you don't have to keep everything. You don't have to keep all your digital photos either. What I do with my own photos for the stuff that we take with our digital camera, we like to call that born digital photos, is my husband and I sit down about 4 times a year and we pick out the ones we like the most and we print them. We upload them to our local photo store. We print out copies for ourselves and for all the grandparents and the aunts and uncles, and we send them out, because that hard copy is going to last longer than the digital. But again, you don't need to print all of them out. I mean, I'm sort of relieved that we're not in the world of 24 exposure doubles of prints when you get that, there's 2 or 3 ones that just stink. And you got 6 photos, So that is a nice luxury, and we should take advantage of it. So quickly, best practices for storing and saving your digital photos. You want to use a common file format, right? And this is sort of looking ahead to the future. You want to make sure that there will be software around to read it, to interpret it, to change those 1s and 0s back into the photo that you're hoping to find. So for an example, a PSD extension on a file, that's Adobe Photoshop. That is a single company's proprietary format. That's a bad idea. What archivists recommend as best practice is an uncompressed TIFF file, TIFF. And the uncompressed is one of the most important parts about that, and I'm going to get into that in just a minute. JPEG is probably the most common digital photo file format that everyone's familiar with, right? What you may or may not know is that it's a compression formula, that there's compression going on. That's why JPEGs are small enough that you could send them by email, which you couldn't do with a TIFF, because TIFFs are quite large. The problem with that is if you change a JPEG file, right, if you open it in some sort of software that lets you, add a caption or fix red eye or whatever, and you save it, each time you resave it, you lose information, and it has to do with the process of compression and uncompression, right? And so if this, say we have a photograph of this bottle of water, right? And what the pixel is the smallest unit in a digital photo, right? That's the smallest piece of information. What JPEG does is it says, okay, for these, however many, 25 pixels, it's clear, it's this color. And for these 25 pixels, it's clear, it's this color. So then when it compresses down, it drops out 24 of those pixels and keeps that one. And then when it rebuilds it, it says these are all the same, and then you rebuild it that way. The problem is, the more times you do that, and when you're just viewing it, it's not a problem. It's when you save it and change it that you lose information each time, and it just gets sort of more and more muddy or more and more pixelated. So what you want to do, especially if you, if we're not talking about born digital photos, if we're talking about a scanning project, something you're scanning on your own, you want to save them as an uncompressed TIFF file. I know I said that already, but I'm just going to keep saying it. If you want, it makes perfect sense to also have smaller JPEGs that you can email to people and all that sort of great stuff. But what you want to do is you want to generate that JPEG from the digital master, and that's what we like to call it, the unmolested master. Meaning, don't do any restoration work on it, keep it as is, and then save a new copy of the TIFF. And so the same sort of compression problem, you can save a TIFF a million times, it's never going to change, because there's no compression in it. It is every bit of information that was there when you scanned it. The disadvantage of that is that it takes up more space. So it's another reason before you start a family scanning project, think about how much you really want to scan. Yes.
So are there tables, I mean, like on our scanner, for example, we can do 300 PPI, 600, 1200.
The question is, how do you decide what resolution to scan at?
I mean, if you're scanning slides, because that has a lot of memory on a slide.
Well, yeah, okay, quick and dirty scanning resolution, right? And I confess, it took me a while to figure this out myself, and it wasn't until I was working as an image researcher and I was sourcing photos digitally that there was a light bulb moment. Okay, PPI is pixels per inch. That's the language of your computer, right? That smallest little bit in a photo. DPI is dots per inch, and that's the language your printer uses. That's one dot of ink that smacks down on a paper. Usually what people are concerned about with resolution is they want it, when they print that photo out, they want it to look the same, right? They don't want it to look pixelated, they want it to be the same size or larger of the one that they scanned. Print quality is 300 DPI. But if we're talking about, and here's the part that I didn't get for years. There's a second half to that equation, and that is at 100%. So if you have a 5x7 photo, you only ever want to print it out as 5x7. You don't need to blow it up for any reason. And if you scan it at 300 DPI, I tend to just go up a little bit to 400 DPI because who knows? Better printers, better resolution someday might be a good idea. Then that's gonna cover you. If you want that 5x7 print to be 8x10, or if you want that teeny tiny little slide to print out at 4x6 or 5x7, then you need to scan at a much higher resolution. And there are tables, there are formulas that will give you that data. Like you plug in, how big the original is, how big you want to be able to print it out without it having obvious pixelation, and it'll tell you what that is. And for slides, it's very, very high. So if you want to store your slides digitally, and for print quality, 300 DPI is what you want. But for screens don't have that high of a resolution. So if you're only going to look at it on your computer or on a television, you can get away with a little bit lower. But as an archivist, I have to think if space is that much of an issue, maybe I would recommend scanning fewer slides, because it seems crazy to lose information, to just retain, because the point of the slide is to be projected so you can see it actually very large. So if you scan a slide at 300 DPI, it might look fine on your computer screen. It could fill your computer screen. It would look pretty good. But if you printed it out any bigger than that, it would not look good.
So what would you choose? What?
There are tables. I can't do that formula off the top of my head, but there are. It's just a matter of math.
Well, I found, I don't know, I either did it at 300 or 600, and it was 4x6. But then if I took about a third of that picture and turned that into a 4x6, then it started to get fuzzy on me. So.
And that's just on the screen.
Well, no, that was just in a print.
No, that was printing. Yes.
Seems like the special scanner is just for slides. Scan in the thousands of dots per inch rather than 300 to 600.
Absolutely, it's very high. It's very high. Scanners that are designed to slide scans, yes, scan at a very high resolution. It's true. Okay, one more thing. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Scan your prints, print your scans. More copies, more likely to survive. And that's obviously not going to work with your entire collection, but we're going to pick the ones that really matter the most, right? And make sure that there are copies spread around as far and wide as possible, and so everybody can enjoy them. And I'm going to stick around for another hour. I've got some supplies back there to sell. Kathy, my friend, volunteered to come here and do that so I could actually answer questions while people are shopping. Sounds so funny. But, yeah, please, any questions that you have, absolutely.
Okay, I'm
Yeah.
doing a scrapbook for a son, okay?
Scrapbook for your son, yes.
And, I have some newspaper clippings from various things that he was involved in. And so, now this doesn't have to last 100 years, you know, kind of thing. But am I better off to scan those and print them?
Right.
Or to attach them to a sheet of interesting paper?
Right, the question is with newspaper clippings, if it's better to scan them and print them out or just attach the newspaper clippings themselves to the page. Newspaper clippings are the cheapest, most acidic looking pulp paper. They will go bad before any other paper. General practice in archives is to photocopy the clippings. If the clippings are deemed to be important enough to keep, they're either microfilmed or photocopied, because that's a short type of those. And the other thing about acid, right, and the reason why acid-free, is such a big deal for scrapbookers, is acid can migrate, right? So if you have, has anyone ever like gone through a stack of papers and there was a clipping and then a regular piece of paper and there's actually a brown mark? That is a burn. That is a burn. Librarians like to refer to acidic paper as slow fire, and that's basically what it is. So, but the other question is, right, there are two kinds of value. There's the informational value that something has, and that could be a photograph or a newspaper clipping, and then there's the artifactual value, right? It's value as a thing. But if you're not, and some people are very attached to newsprint as a thing, they don't want to lose that. But if you're not beholden to that, I would say scan it or photocopy.
Maybe a better example then is obituaries of ancestors.
Right.
Those then should be scanned, not just, I could save the original, but I need to scan and print the other as
Right,
well.
if you have obituaries from your ancestors, absolutely. If you want it to last a good long time, you would either photocopy it onto acid-free paper or scan it and print it out. Right, because even that, I don't know, it might be a toss-up actually between the original newsprint and the digital copy. Should do a test. Yes.
Okay, I have my mother's diary from 1910 print, so the paper is very old. What would be, like, my children would all like to see that in her handwriting.
Sure.
Would be the simplest way to copy it all.
The question is a family diary that's from about 1910, and so the question is mostly how to make sure that all the kids can enjoy their own copy of it. Well, you could photocopy it directly onto paper, or you could scan it. In either case, I would recommend that you only do that once, meaning, so maybe scanning is the better choice, I'm thinking as I'm talking, because if you photocopy it, well, you can generate multiple copies off that first photocopy. I'm just saying, there is such a thing as light damage, right? And I'm all for scanning, especially if it means you're going to get the original out of light. But I'm not going to lie to you, right? That very intense burst of light from that scanner, that's real close, is going to be part of that. It's going to, how much damage it's going to cause, I don't know. It's all a balance test, right? But light damage is cumulative and irreversible. So it doesn't mean don't scan. It just means scan it and save the digital in a way that you don't have to rescan the original again. But yeah, and you also could photograph it, right? If you could get it to lie flat, you could create negatives from it. But that seems overly complicated. And if you scan it, it'll retain the color too, because I'm sure it has its own sort of. Yeah.
Thank you.
So is there less light involved in photocopying than there is in scanning?
I couldn't tell you for sure. I would call them very similar, right? The point is you need to have a lot of bright light to make that copy. So whether a scanner or a photocopier is more dangerous, I really couldn't say. My hesitation about a photocopier was that you would copy it once and have a collated copy, and then you would copy the original again, which really nobody does that because you can generate multiple photocopies from.
Kind of the same.
Yeah.
Dad has a 3-ring binder filled with valuable family photographs from when he was in 4-H.
Cool.
So do you take it, we need 5 copies. Do you take each photo out and scan it then?
Right.
Or
So
can you do it easier or faster way? Or
Yeah.
is it that time consuming that you would scan each photo in a TIFF file?
Right. So the patriarch of the family has a 3-ring binder, and then is each photo in its own sleeve, or is it sort of a slip-in where there's multiple?
There are the black 4 corners, the pictures stuck in there.
Right. Well, the question then is, so the concern is, how do you do this quickly? How do you do this efficiently when you want to have multiple copies for multiple people? Well, I can tell you that the least expensive way is to do it yourself. That's not going to be the quickest way, of course. And it depends on what you want at the other end. You can treat that binder, the same way you would treat, you know, any other album. Does everybody need every photo? I mean, is there a series of 4 or 5 photos that are basically the same shot? And, you know, it can be sort of a collective family decision of how much money are we gonna invest in doing this, and how much are people willing to spend. You know, of course, you could recreate the whole thing if you wanted to. You know, it really depends on how much time and how much money you wanna put into it, which really isn't an answer, I'm sorry, but, you know, it's just, right, it's just gonna be a balance test, right? And if it's going, you know, if you have something like that, and that's a very real thing, right? How do you share these with everybody? You know, because family trees get bigger as you go. I would say, we're almost done here, but, you know, sit down and just talk about it all together, because you could, you know, there are places where, you know, if you've got digital photos and you've got stories with them, you can go online and you can turn them into a real book. That's a hardbound book, and then that's easy to get more copies of that. So. One more, okay.
So what's gonna last longer, a photocopy, something off your inkjet, or a laser?
Question is, what's gonna last longer, an inkjet print, a photocopy, or something out of a laser printer? And I don't know for sure. I have done some research on inkjet longevity of photos, and after this is over, it's also on my website in the preservation spotlight. It sort of outlines it.
They don't know yet how long it's gonna last.
They don't know how long. I would still recommend that you upload your photos to a photo processing place and have them do it. I used to do my own photos on my inkjet, and for not just preservation reasons, but other reasons as well, sort of moved away from it. If you do want to print your own photos on your inkjet printer, make sure you've got the paper, the ink, it's from the same company, and ideally with the same manufacturer of your printer. Because when they put on the package that this is going to last 100 years, they've only tested their own paper with their own ink. So cheap ink can sort of ruin that equation entirely.
I have one quick question. On the CDs and things.
Okay, I'm sorry, we just need to wrap this up, and then I can take more questions when we're done. Thank you very much. This is the